the CyberHub studio. You're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Well, good morning, security gang, and welcome to another episode of the CyberHub Podcast. We've got a lot to cover over a very, very busy cybersecurity weekend. So I hope you're strapped in and ready for a very busy week for a lot of us. A lot of patching to do, a lot of vulnerability assessments, a lot of looking at the fundamentals of how we manage our security programs. That's all in store for us this week and so much more. But before we get started on today's show, a big shout out to everyone tuning in Monday, April 4th, 2022. I hope you're ready. April, typically a very, very busy month in the history of cybersecurity. We look years and years and years, year over year. The month of April is a fairly busy month, especially with spring break, the holidays, and everything else going on. It's a perfect time for threat actors to strike. So don't let yourself become one of those victims in that chain of history. Know that? Now, shout out to KnowBe4 for their support of our program. Without their support, the show would not be possible. You can find more about them in the show notes. Now, let's get into some of our stories today. But before we do that, coffee cup cheers, folks. My espresso machine did not get delivered today. I actually went to pick one up yesterday and they didn't even have it, but I'll be picking one up later today. And tomorrow when we do the show, I'll have a beautiful, amazing, lovely cup of espresso with me to enjoy with all of y'all. So let's get into today's show. And here we go. Let's talk about Spring4Shell. So Spring4Shell, really the top developer platform for Java application development frameworks. It's owned by VMware. Spring4Shell, a lot of people, we heard it last week, talked about it here on the show. It's the new Log4j. It's going to be significant. People don't understand. Yeah, there's some truth and some not truth to it. So there's multiple CVEs for this one. This one, CVE 2022-22965, the Spring4Shell or SpringShell. And it's been described as a critical remote code execution vulnerability in the Spring framework that could be exploited without authentication. The other critical flaw, 22963, which affects the Spring Cloud function and which also allows remote code execution. The third one, CV 2022-22950, a medium severity denial of service vulnerability. The possibility of accidental disclosure of Spring4Shell by a researcher before patches were made available led to a lot of confusion and concerns. Some of it was because the researcher himself came from China, took it off. So was that a kind of like, is China already exploiting this and this researcher really risked his life to put it out there? Or as the story seems to indicate, this was published before patches were made available, which led to a whole lot of confusion. Either way, the rabbit's out of the hat, and we know that this is there. Some organizations say, well, we're not impacted by this. We've done our own risk assessments. We're looking at this. We've done vulnerability assessments, and we don't think we're impacted by Spring4Shell. Others, not so much. ForgeRock, SonicWall, Commvault, Sang4, Acunix, Okta, Jenkins, Dynatrace, Metabase, and Aerospike, they're not impacted by Spring4Shell. Firms that are still assessing, like Refocus and Flexera, all are still assessing that as well. So some of the companies, BTC, Bluerick, and Jamf, have all been impacted by this. SAP also provided us knowledge-based articles regarding its impact, and had 4, both of which were submitted by anonymous researchers. Apple is aware of the report and of this issue and that may have been actively exploited, according to them. We've seen actual exploits do this. The fixes for iPhone 6s and later, all iPad Pro models, iPad Airs 2 and later, iPad 5th generation, iPad mini, and iPad Touch. Apple declined to talk a bit more about what it really means, although I'm sure we'll see some more information in the coming weeks. Now let's get back to the Achilles heels of what we were talking about earlier with Spring4Shell. Gitlab, the DevOps platform, has reset passwords of some users' accounts after addressing a critical account takeover vulnerability. According to the company, in the Gitlab Community Edition and Enterprise Edition, versions prior to 14.7.4 and 14.8.5 and 14.9.2, and a hard-coded password was set when the account was registered using OmniAuth provider. The critical severity bug, which was tracked to CV 2022-1162, CVSS score of 9 or 0.1, could allow attackers to take over accounts. Gitlab has taken the precaution and reset passwords for users who believe may have been impacted by the bug. There's the latest Gitlab release addresses this flaw along with other two high-severity cross-site scripting vulnerabilities tracked to CV 2022-1175. The first of the bugs exists due to improper neutralization of a user input in notes. Thus, an attacker could inject HTML in the notes and exploit the XSS. The second high severity issue is tracked to CV 2022-1190, CVSS score of 8.7 as well, and exists because of an improper handling of user input. Again, an attacker could exploit the bug by abusing multi-word milestone references in the description of issues or in the comments. Here's what I would expect: a few things. When you need to upgrade your GitLab instance, they've given you that. But if you look at GitLab, GitHub, Bitbucket, and many more, as well as GitKraken and so many of these other ones, these are going to be where most of the attackers are going to spend their time. That's where they're going to get the most bang for their dollars. We're not talking about ransomware attacks or anything like that. But if you want to get a sophisticated supply chain attack, you're going to start from right there. You'll be able to plant your backdoors into software releases, get through without having any security tool recognize what you're doing, and sit in a system. You could sit there for years before anyone even knows you're there. Think SolarWinds on steroids. That's the vectors. That's where we have to start securing. If you're not doing it, if you're not focused on, your GitLab, your GitHub, your Bitbucket, your GitKraken, whatever you're using for your CI/CD, for your tooling, for your coding, then you're missing a big part of your security program, and it's something you really need to address. Our fourth story for the day is a newly found Android malware that's recording audio and tracking your location. Yours truly here has always been outspoken to the fact that Google Play is just a shit app store, and Android is just not, I wouldn't trust Android in my business. It's very, very difficult. Turla, which is a Russian state-supported hacking group, which is known for creating custom malware to target European and American systems, primarily for espionage. They've been behind the Sunburst backdoor that was used for the SolarWinds supply chain. Now, researchers from Lab 42 identified a malicious APK named Process Manager that acts as Android spyware. It uploads information to threat actors. While it's not clear how the spyware is distributed, once installed, Process Manager attempts to hide on the Android device using a gear-shaped icon pretending to be a system component. Upon its first launch, the prompts the user to allow it to use the following 18 permissions, including modify audio settings, read call logs, read contacts, external storage, read and write external storage, read phone state, SMS, receive boot completed, record audio, send SMS, and wake log. These permissions are serious risks to privacy, among many others. It's a strange case for some because they go, well, what's the point of this? But it could very well just be the ability to track and gain data in a world where data really does matter, and you can influence the way people think and the way people operate. And especially on the business side, if you've got business email on there, if you're doing all your business communication, those conversations at that point become mutt because everyone knows about them. And they've got that data and they can use it as they see fit. So keep your eyes out on those Android phones and those Google Play Store devices. A good MDM policy there would be very, very helpful. CISA adds 7 more bugs to their Known Exploited Vulnerabilities Catalog. The vulnerabilities added include an arbitrary file upload vulnerability in the Trend Micro APAC Central, an insufficient access control issue in Dell's deputable driver, and improper authorization vulnerability in the QNAP NOS instances running HBS3, an authentication bypass vulnerability in the user portal and web admin of Sophos Firewall, vulnerability in the Microsoft Windows user profile services, and 2 authentication bypass vulnerabilities involving the SANS Gigabyte passive optical network routers, all of which have remediation dates of April 21st, and CISA said 7 additions were based on evidence of active exploitation. These type of vulnerabilities are a frequent attack vector for malicious cyber actor and pose a significant risk to the federal enterprise. And now they've been added on the list, meaning they've got only 60 days to get those patched and taken care of. Folks, that's it for our show today. We'll be back with a lot more tomorrow. Until then, make sure to patch your systems. Make sure to study and get your risk assessments and vulnerability assessments done on Spring4Shell and your GitLab, GitHub, Bitbucket instances. Until then, have a great rest of your day. Happy Monday and stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.